Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Let's paint. So this is the 7th page of the Jungle Animals Watercolor Coloring book that I make. Everything will be in the description. As always, you need to have a palette. Any palette works. This is just the one that I make. Paper, scrap paper, just to test colors and as you mix them, and brush strokes. Any brush works. This is just a regular Taklon brush. It's nothing special. A place to mix your colors, like this little porcelain soap dish. A paper towel so you can dry off your brush, or a regular towel, whatever works. And then some water. I have a jar of water on the side. I just don't have enough space to show it in here. Okay, so this one is pretty straightforward. Basically, we'll go ahead and I'm gonna wet my brush here, and then it often helps to just wet your paint before you start painting. So I picked this up at the dollar store. It was like less than $1. But what we'll start off with is obviously there's a lot of green in this one, and there's actually a lot of colors in here. The first thing we'll do is we'll grab the green and just mix them up on the side. Add some extra water because we do want to have a lot of this mixture to go off of. I'm just going to test the color right here, and that looks like exactly what we need. If you have a different shade of green, because green is the largest occupier of space on the color wheel, on the color spectrum, there's a lot of different types of green. So if you have a different shade of green, just add some yellow to it to bring it more to a little yellow green. And so because there's stripes here, we want to make sure that we leave space for the stripes. So initially what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just in between the stripes, kind of going from about halfway down, we're going to put in this mixture like that. A little bit over here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll rinse our brush. It doesn't have to be completely rinsed. A little bit of the color on there is fine, and then we're just going to kind of pull some of that color upwards. We are going to leave this line in the middle blank as well, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So basically we're just fading out the color upwards like that. And you can always rinse your brush and maybe dry it off a little bit if you want to take off a little more off the top so that you have that nice faded effect. Like that. And then we're going to grab a little more of the color and then add some here, just on the upper part of the leg, like I guess on the thigh. And then a little bit here, like that. And then rinse our brush again, dry it off a little bit, and then just fade that out upwards. Okay, so far so good. And then the next thing that we want to do is grab a little bit of yellow, because we do want to make this a little more yellowish. And then leave a mark up here on top of the head of the chameleon, like that. Okay, we'll rinse our brush. And the next thing you want to do is you want to get some turquoise or a blue-green. If you don't have that in your palette, it's really simple to mix. You just need to get some green and blue and mix them until you get kind of like a teal or turquoise, something in between. And then you use this color to fill in the stripes. It's okay if it bleeds in a little bit into the green that we already placed. In fact, it'll make it look more interesting if it does that. Just go ahead and fill that in. And then stop right about the white line that we already have going across. Wet our brush, dry it off a little bit, and then kind of pick up some of that color so you can fade it out upwards. Like that. And then wet your brush and just rinse your brush, and just with a moist brush, not completely wet, just run in the middle like this so that it picks up some of those colors, but it's still predominantly white on that little mark there. And then rinse your brush. Rinse your brush and then grab some light brown, some red, and some yellow. I'm mixing a orange shade. Probably a little more yellow needed here. A little more of the light brown. Okay, that's decent. And so basically what we'll do here is, starting from the inside, we're going to do just 1/2 of the tail going outward. And right around here, we're going to switch to the bottom part of the tail. Like that. At any time, feel free to pause or rewind or watch something that I'm painting and then go back to it before you start painting if it helps. And now that we have that established, we'll go ahead and rinse our brush. Not completely, there's still a little bit of color on there. And I just want to pull out that mixture like that. And going all the way around, all the way back to where we started. Perfect. And then rinse our brush again and then dry it off so that we can fade that edge in a little better into the green, like that. And we're going to do the same exact thing, just fading it out. Maybe a little bit more over here. Okay, so that looks good. We're going to let that dry, and while that's drying, we can focus on the face. Now the face has a lot of red in it, so basically we're just going to be working primarily with the red. Whatever red you have works just fine. But if you think that the red is leaning a little more towards like purple, like let's say if you have like burgundy or crimson, you can always add a little more yellow or brown to kind of just shift which way the color is leaning. Okay, so with this color now, what we'll do is we'll add basically the same process. I'm going to add more towards 1/2 of the limbs, starting right here, and then a little bit right here. And we'll do one part at a time, so we're not risking the color drying off on us, not allowing us to blend it. So I'm going to rinse my brush, dry it off, and then just pull out that color to the half that's not painted. There we go. I'm going to rinse my brush again and maybe blend it in a little bit up here like this. There we go. So the next part will be up here for the head. I'm gonna paint all that in at the the neck, and then going back towards the arm that's further back, same thing. And then also adding a little more red in between here, like this. In between the upper lip and the top of the head. The eye, we're just going to leave it as it is for now. We're just gonna kind of add that in here. And then rinse my brush completely, dry it off, but I still want some moisture in the brush. And then just again pulling out those colors, pulling out the more faint, diluted color. And that's what we're also going to use for the eye and all the other aspects of the face here. I'm gonna leave that and then move on to the other leg down here. We're gonna add a little bit, maybe a little bit too strong. I always try to dilute the red a little bit, especially for the first layer. You can always go back and add a little more, but red is such a strong color. And since with watercolor, it's hard to correct mistakes or take paint off of the paper, I try to just basically try to get it right on the first time. If you mess up a little bit though, it's fine. And then I'm rinsing my brush, drying it off and doing the same thing, just pulling out that color like that. And grabbing a good amount of red again. So a little more on the back leg, like that. Ooh, dropped my brush there a little bit. Good thing I caught it. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to immediately rinse my brush, and while there's water on it, I'm just going to kind of try to pick that up, dry it off, and then pick up a little bit more. This is actually pretty good to show how I would fix a mistake. Basically, I'm just trying to pick up as much of the pigment as I can with a wet brush, and what'll happen is when I paint over this area, it'll be much less noticeable, even though it's fairly noticeable right now. Gotta be more careful. So I'll go ahead and I'll grab some more of the red while we're still working with that, and then add on the arm that's further back. Kind of doubling down a little more on the saturation, which will also make it appear a little darker. And a little more here, like that. A little more here. On the second go around, I'm not as worried about diluting it out and maybe showing a little bit of the texture of the skin, because, you know, the lizards in general have very textured, scaly skin. And then I'm gonna rinse my brush a little bit and then add a little more color in the eye, maybe fade out a little bit of that, a little bit of here. There we go. That was good. I'm gonna rinse my brush now and then go back to the previous color that we mixed and do the same thing where we just emphasize some of the color in the tail, just half of it, following the same pattern that we did before, like that. And rinse my brush and then just fade some of it. I don't have to do all of it, but just a little bit, just give it a little bit of a variety. There we go. And next I can go back to my turquoise color and then add darker excuse me, darker and more saturated. Since there's more paint, it'll look more saturated, but also because there's more paint, less water, it'll also look darker because it's blocking more of the paper underneath. And so we're just using that to our advantage, just to color in down here, and then rinse our brush, and then just fade some of that out like that. There we go. The next thing to do would be to grab some of the green, just a regular green, and then basically the same thing where we're just using a more saturated color, adding a little bit down here, a little bit down here, like that, a little bit here. And if some of it runs into one another, that's fine. Maybe a little bit of the texture of the skin. A little bit up here, like that. And then rinse my brush. I'm going to fade out a little bit in some parts, not everything. There we go. Okay. So far, so good. But we do need to add some... Actually, I'm going to stick with the turquoise. We need to add some to the tail. Basically, we're just going to go like this, right over, and it's okay if it blends in. Actually, that'll make it look more interesting. I'm going to do a little bit like... Pick up a little more, like that. Down here. Just basically spacing them out. Try to make it kind of evenly spaced, but then as it gets closer to the end of the tail, maybe start packing in the stripes a little closer to one another, just to make it look more consistent, like that. There we go. It does not have to be perfect by any means. There we go. Just rinse our brush. And the next thing to do is to grab some light brown, mix it up with some of the dark brown, because we don't want it to be too light. Something like that. There we go. That's a pretty good color. Add a good amount of water, and that will be the base tone for the branch. We're just gonna go ahead and cover that in like that. Cover that in here like that. Cover in here. And down here. There we go. I'll rinse my brush. That looks pretty good. And then the next part, I actually do want to add a little more red, but for the parts that are red, but I also will add a little bit of the brown just to make it a little darker. And honestly, a little bit of purple too will also help. Oh, that's way too much purple. That is way too much purple. I wanted it to make it a little darker, but not that purple. So let's see. And I could have added a little bit of green, but that would have made it, would have neutralized it too much. It'll start looking more black than anything. So Now I'm just going to add a little bit of this mixture back here, like that. A little bit on the edge of the arm here, a little bit in between the fingers, definitely underneath the chin. Maybe a couple of short marks right here just to show some texture. A little bit around the eye, like that. Up here, and then back here, like that. Just a little bit, not too much, but it just gives that little bit of an emphasis and differentiation between the light and the dark. There we go. And the next part is to just grab a good amount of the dark brown and just test that out. Okay, that looks good. And then just run that on the bottom part. If you have too much on your brush, you could just make a couple of marks on this scrap piece of paper. But just do that on the bottom part, and then when you get underneath the chameleon, just fill that in as if there's a shadow, just kind of like following, yeah, where the chameleon would be casting a shadow, like that. Maybe a little more up here, like that. There we go. And here I'm just imagining that some of the light is coming through on the side of the tail. There we go. Now I'm just gonna rinse my brush. I'm just gonna step back for a moment to see if I want to add anything more before I start doing the background. I think the only thing that I will add before doing the background is a little more turquoise, because the stripes look a little too faded, and especially at the bottom, I want them to just pop a little more. So just down here, we're going to do this, like that. Over here. And then rinse my brush and then just dry it off a little bit so I can fade out that edge just a little, like that. Okay, I'm going to step back again. Yeah, I like how that looks. That's what we'll go with. And the last part is the background. So basically, same thing when we did the tree frog. I'm just gonna grab some of the light blue, and I'm just gonna start basically filling in. Start with the bottom part underneath the tree. Just kind of carefully going next to everything else. Like that. Okay. And right about here, I'm gonna rinse my brush a little bit, not completely, and dry it off a little so I can start pulling out some color, but also doing a little bit of a texture by pressing in against the paper. And then if I need to, I can grab a little more color. And then same thing down here. And the goal is to just kind of almost like do a vignette where it fades out the further it gets away from the main subject of the painting. There we go, like that. And now basically do the same thing on the other side, except I'm going to keep the paint a lot more concentrated down here where it's closer to the branch. And then as it gets a little further, I can start diluting it a bit. Grab some water and just kind of pull it out like that. And then start fading it out when it gets further away. There we go. And then grabbing more paint to go back in the little space underneath the chameleon, like that. And then rinse my brush and then maybe pick up some of this because this looks a little bit too strong back here. Fade it out, make it look a little more coherent with the background. Okay, I'm gonna step back once more. Okay, yeah, I think we're done. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I really like how that turned out, especially for such a colorful image. And it took 27 minutes, so a little bit longer than the last one, but I really like how it turned out. As always, if you have questions, just shoot me a message or email or comment, whatever works. But with that, I will see you on the next one.